Good afternoon, cadets, staff, and faculty. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Rob Payne, Director of Operations for the Modern War Institute, and it is my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker, Brigadier General Steve Butow from the Defense Innovation Unit. Brigadier General Steve Bucky Butow is the Director of the Space Portfolio at the Defense Innovation Unit. He joined the team in 2015 as an early plank owner when DIU was known as the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, and he helped establish the organization's operating locations in Silicon Valley, California, Boston, Massachusetts, and Austin, Texas. In his reserve capacity, General Butow is a brigadier general serving as the commander of the California Air National Guard, where he leads 4,900 airmen assigned to 5 wings and a headquarters staff. Prior to this assignment, he was a special assistant to the director of the Air National Guard. He has more than 3,500 flying hours in a T-37, T-38, and C-130, and HC-130, and MC-130 aircraft. Additionally, he has served as a researcher for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence SETI Institute. Brigadier General Butow worked on instrument concepts for Mars surface soil analysis at the NASA Ames Research Center in Mountain View, California. He later served as a co-principal investigator for a series of airborne science missions for which he was recognized for outstanding achievement and contributions to the Space Science Division in 1999 and received an Ames Honor Award as a member of the Astrobiology Mission Project team in 2000. Brigadier General Butow graduated from San Jose State University with a BA in Physics and Astronomy and earned an MS in Management with a specialization in Air and Space Strategic Studies from the University of Maryland. He also completed executive courses at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School for Government and was a member of the National Leadership Preparedness Initiative and PLI Cohort 16. Brigadier General Butow is a lifetime member of the Honor Society for Phi Kappa Phi for academic achievement. These topics advance the Dean's theme for this academic year and are critically important to your development as future junior officers. On behalf of the Commandant, please join me in extending a warm West Point welcome to Brigadier General Butow. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah. Hey, thank you very much, first of all, for enduring my bio. A little caveat, the reason he kept tripping over Mr. Butow and Brigadier General Butow is I'm a DoD civilian working at the Defense Innovation Unit, and then militarily, I'm a commander, but I came to Washington, D.C., the East Coast. I live in California. I came to Washington, D.C. this week for the Air Force Association meeting, which is a very large venue, but the best part about it is it's a meeting in D.C. where you get to wear a duty uniform. So instead of having like several bags full of suits, I threw a couple flight bags in my backpack and pressed out here. But this is really going to be the highlight of my week. Seriously, this is such a great honor. It's my first time at West Point, and hopefully not the last time. But just so I know you're all live out there, who's going to win the football game tonight? There you go. Awesome. All right. Good response. Okay. So I'm going to talk. I'm going to share a little bit. Just give you some highlights. I'm going to share a little bit about leadership and mentorship, and actually influencers on my career, because I think that's really important, because that's a lot of what you are all going to do when you graduate and start moving out. A lot of you are already leading and mentoring here, and that's really essential. And that's a core tenet of innovation. I'm going to talk about innovation because that's really the hot topic, and then I'm going to end with some impacts. And I'm going to try to do this in the next 40 minutes or so, because I really want to open up to questions. I don't want you to be bashful. You ask me anything. If I don't know, I'll be humble. I'll say I don't know. But seriously, this is really important, because this presentation is all about you. I was talking with Brigadier General Robinson earlier, and we've started a transformation of our military, which is really adopting and employing innovation at every level, the tactical, the operational, strategic level. And we've started this transformation, but we're not going to complete it. You are going to continue this path forward. And hopefully this presentation today will convince you why it's so necessary to do this. My boss, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, wrote a paper, and his mantra is accelerate, change, or lose. And by the way, he just got confirmed to be the next chairman, so you'll have an opportunity, hopefully, to host him here. But we have to accelerate the rate of change and modernize our force, modernize our warfighting spirit and our thought process, or risk potentially losing the next fight. And so there's a lot on the table. The title of this presentation is really where DIU, the Defense Innovation Unit, is going with our new strategy. We need to focus on those things where we can have the greatest strategic effect. We need to do it with speed, and most importantly, do it with scale. And how do we use the entirety of our industrial base, not just here in the United States, but how we partner with our allies, regional partners globally, so that we're one integrated team when it comes to warfighting. How many folks are international students here today? Awesome. Right. So this is even more important for you because you have to help us to build the strong bonds and migrate to a yes foreign environment, right? So we're sharing information and operating together. So a little bit about me that's not in my bio. So I'm the second of 5 kids. My dad's up there in the upper left. I was of the 5 kids, I was voted least likely to go into the military. So, which is funny. So when I graduated high school, my parents had sold their house. They moved away. I moved in with my grandparents. I was kind of a contrarian, and I wanted to be in a rock band. So yeah, exactly. So I did that for a couple years. Kind of found myself, and I realized there's no money in this. And so I went back to my dad, and I said, "Hey, I've decided I'm going to go to college. Do you have a recommendation for me? Can you help me out?" He says, "Yes, I'm going to help you out. It's called the GI Bill." So I enlisted. I got in for college, but as soon as I got to my first assignment, my attitude changed because the military is one of the finest institutions that you will ever experience in your lifetime. And you are all part of a volunteer force, 1% of the US population. You all, because of where you're at and where you're going to be going, you're the 1% of the 1%. And the leadership I'm going to be talking about here in a little bit is the 1% of that. So it's a lot of responsibility, but you wouldn't be here if you didn't earn it, and if you didn't demonstrate the potential to do great things. So I was enlisted for about 4 years. I became a staff sergeant. The other gentleman in that picture is a chief. I didn't even know what an officer was for the first 3 years. I was a support technician for a pararescue team, so doing in a combat rescue unit, and that was great. And one of the senior officers, who was an Army aviator, he was a helicopter pilot, said, "Hey, you should compete for a pilot slot." I was in the National Guard, so that's how it happened. And I wound up going to get a commission. I went to Lawfoot Air Force Base in Texas and got to fly some really cool airplanes. And the washout rate in Air Force pilot training is pretty steep. So by the time we're in the T-38 phase, which you see there, more than half of our class is gone to other jobs in the Air Force. I did that. In the lower middle, I was actually deployed overseas when 9/11 happened, and then subsequently spent about 4 years of my life on a bunch of different deployments over there, and which was pretty extraordinary. And that's actually, I made that transition from being a tactical operator to working at the operational level. And that's when I started really having some of the mentoring relationships I'm going to talk about in a little second. Anyways, and then of course I put a hero shot in there. The fun thing about flying MC-130s and HC-130 aircraft in the Air Force is we refuel helicopters. And part of that mission is helping to support other elements in special operations, like the 160th SOAR and others. Very professional organizations, and working jointly like that has always brought us to a higher level of professionalism. So mentorship. I'm sure you hear about it a lot here, but it's a two-way street, right? So we have good leaders, we have effective leaders, we have extraordinary leaders, and good leaders are usually good managers, right? And you need managers, and there's like, hey, what? Where's the? There's no hot sauce on the table, right? It's it's fajita night. What's up? Or somebody's managing that, right? And so it might be an officer, but we're not going to talk about good leaders and good managers here. We're going to talk about extraordinary leaders. And extraordinary leaders go out of their way to mentor, right? To pass their knowledge on, to help bring people up. And they're indiscriminate about that. And if you watch a really extraordinary leader, they do that all the time, which is really fantastic. But the extraordinary leaders also listen. And they don't always give the answer. They might give you a little steerage. Extraordinary leaders will delegate down and give people the opportunity to fail. I worked for a very smart person at one point who told me that smart failure is good, stupid failure is not good, right? So stupid failure is like you didn't do your homework or you clearly violated a regulation or policy. Smart failure is just going out and being agile and trying new things, and not being afraid to take some risk. So the first mentor I'm going to talk about, and by the way, these are all Army mentors who helped shape me in my career. First one, Chief Warrant Officer Ron McNeil. He was a civilian when I started working for him, but he was a Chief Warrant Officer in Army Special Forces, and he learned a lot. He was in Somalia in Mogadishu back in the 90s when we lost more military members in a single day than we had since the Vietnam War had concluded. And this is the coolest, most intellectual guy I've ever met. When Operation Enduring Freedom kicked off, if you remember, the first phase of the campaign in Afghanistan was largely a special operations and interagency campaign, rather, and he was the co-author of that concept of operation. So when I went to work for him, he was basically the Joint Personnel Recovery Agency representative to U.S. CENTCOM, and he helped foster a culture and environment where we actually saved over a short period of time 1,000 people, not just U.S. soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, but also coalition members. And some of the toughest experiences I had as a combat rescue pilot during those early days prior to 2010, he was my wingman and really helped me out through that stuff. So really, really extraordinary. Next person I'm going to talk about is Colonel Pete Newell. So Pete was put in charge of the Army's Rapid Equipment Force. If you remember, we were having problems with IEDs, vehicles getting blown up, soldiers dying, and we needed to rapidly solve that problem. And the Army put him forward, and he led this effort against all odds. I mean, it's like, the one thing about the Defense Department you're going to learn, it's very bureaucratic. It's steeped in tradition, not the type of tradition that we're celebrating here at West Point, but a tradition which is We have a proven way that we solve problems, and this is how we do it, right? So he really was a trailblazer and took on the establishment to rapidly field capabilities that would make it more survivable for our forces operating in Iraq and eventually Afghanistan. He taught me how to curate a problem, right? So when you were confronted with a problem, you have to say, well, somebody needs to stand back and say, wait, are we solving the right problem? So you say, well, I can't get a date tonight because I'm just too special and I make people, I'm intimidating to people, right? That could be the problem. Of course, the other problem is that maybe you just got like bad BO or some other situation, right? So before you can solve the problem, it's really important that you correctly identify the problem and take and that's an oversimplified one, because that's a problem that any one of us could probably solve immediately, but not every problem is like that. And sometimes to curate a problem effectively, you have to bring other people in from different experiences. That diversity element is really key to doing that. I had, when I was a lieutenant colonel in 2007, I worked with General McChrystal. At that time, General McChrystal had just completed his command with JSOC and had moved on to, he was in ISAF. And the interesting thing about General McChrystal, I'm sure everybody knows, he's just like an Energizer bunny. He sleeps, eats, everything on schedule. But and most of the other generals in the warfighting environment don't, and sometimes it really shows. And my favorite thing about General McChrystal is we'd be on a secure VTC at like 3 o'clock in the morning because something special is going on, and he'd be fresh. He was always awake. He's just working the crowd, and the thing that I learned from him was really the value of surrounding yourself with a good team, a diverse team, and being a good listener. Later on, of course, he taught me something else as a senior leader, which is that never let your guard down, right? So you can be really, really good at something, but you're not infallible, right? So you have to be always out there and keenly aware of mistakes. Funny story is the night I was at an international dinner with him, the night that I found out I was going to be promoted to Brigadier General, and the host of the dinner, who was from India, introduced me as Army Brigadier General Steve Butow, or Bucky is my call sign, and I stood up and I was thinking, well, how do I correct this faux pas? Because General McChrystal's looking right at me like, you're not in the Army. so I said, thank you, Harpreet, but let me just educate. I said, I'm a Brigadier General in the Army Air Corps. So I went with that. Because we, of course, the Air Force wouldn't be the Air Force if we didn't start within the Army. Yeah, that's right. By the way, you'll see guys like me when you deploy forward, special operations and combat rescue, we spend a lot of time at forward operating bases, forward operating locations. We have to kick mud off our boots and sleep out in the field, and it's really great. So we really truly appreciate working with you. This is one of my favorite stories in mentorship. So Captain Dan Berchinsky. So Dan actually graduated from here. He was on patrol and had an IED encounter that blew both of his legs off. And the interesting. Well, I'll tell a story. So he survived that, went home, healed, but he never lost his vision of what he wanted to do. He went to Stanford. He went through the Graduate School of Business, which is a really, really incredible course, a very difficult course to do. He moved off. He started a business, started a family. But the most extraordinary thing that he did, I was a wing commander at the time, and I got this phone call. And it's like, hello, who is it? He's like, you don't know me as Captain Dan Brzezinski. I said, oh, hey, Dan, what's up? What can I do for you? He says, I'm an Army captain. I said, oh, okay. And of course, I didn't recognize his name. But he said, your unit rescued me in Afghanistan. I'd like to come by and say thank you. And I go, wow, that's incredible. And you could go through, in the rescue community, especially in combat rescue, you could go through an entire career and never meet a single person that you saved out in the field. And I have to tell you, I don't want to get graphic, but I mean, sometimes when we're doing this, literally, the medics and these teams are bringing people on our helicopters. They're unrecognizable. They could look like hamburger helper. It's just really, it's really his. And so you don't have a strong sense that they're even going to survive. And our job, we've gotten really good. The number one reason why people perish in combat these days is because they bleed out. And so we have the golden hour rule. It's like we'll do anything to get on top of a down combatant or move a patient so that we can save them. But he came out. I walked in with him from the car. Took a little bit. He sat down in my office for a while, and we rode down to the ops building. And he was so awesome. And the entire helicopter squadron, I think, broke down in tears. They had never had this experience. And he mentored them for like the next half hour about how they were really instrumental in shaping his life. And the fact that he knew, he never doubted that he would come back and see his family again. He never doubted that he would walk again. And anyways, you can't ever question your ability to succeed in life if you're surrounded by people like that. And again, tremendous Army, not even just officer enlisted, other people who helped shape my life. So part of your mentoring experience, and my homework assignment to you when you leave here, is go find mentors. Get outside your comfort zone. Go work and get a joint assignment. Go work with people from the other services. Go interact with your allies and partners. There's a lot to learn there, and you will be much better for it. All right, so changing scope, and now, how many people are like geeks or the goobers in the class here? All right, sorry. All right. All right. Yeah. All right, that's good. All right. There's like a 3 good solid, yeah. And then everybody else was kind of like, I don't know about this, but you don't have to be a geek to appreciate innovation. You just have to be a thinker, right? So you all are living in an extraordinary time in history. You really are. And this era that you're living through right now, it surrounds you. So it surrounds you so you don't even recognize it. But it's really something that we label the 4th Industrial Revolution. And the first Industrial Revolution was really something that America played a big part in, right? Which is the introduction of steam power and heavy mechanization. The Transcontinental Railroad turned the United States into a global superpower, 70 years before, or at least a global economic power, 70 years before World War II. And so that was the first Industrial Revolution. The second Industrial Revolution was really in the beginning of the last century, where Ford, others learned how to produce things at scale, right? So the production of automobiles, the production of airplanes, things that we learned to do during the war, production of ships, other appliances, whole thing. So that industrialization was really incredible, and that required people, and it required tooling and machinery, but that was the second Industrial Revolution. The third Industrial Revolution was really the introduction of robotics and other capabilities that allowed us to do production even more production at scale, and introduce other ways of manufacturing and doing things that increase the speed of delivery of products and services. And the fourth revolution, the one that we're in right now, is really how we take all that before us and how we introduce digital technology. So it's not just good enough to have a widget. What you want is a software-defined widget. Or it's not good enough to just have data. You want information, you want knowledge, and you want to drive that, and you want to have capacity to take an infinite amount of data and turn it into information as quickly as possible. In the context of all of you in the military, the two most important things that you're going to find as an operator and as a leader is I want really good situational awareness, and I need as much time as possible to make good decisions. And sometimes decision making, you have to make those decisions in a very short time period, right, in order to survive or perhaps lose. And so making really good decisions, having extraordinary situational awareness in battle space, where that's we say that in Indo-PACOM, it's the tyranny of distance, right? So it's a very large theater. In space, we say it's the tyranny of volume. But if we wind up going into a major theater war, it's most likely going to be global. And how do you reduce all that data into something actionable, and do it faster than your adversary? And on situational awareness, if you think about situational awareness, right now we have plenty of capability that says we can identify a rocket plume, like a missile launches. But what if we could get back here and have a baseline of patterns of life, countrywide patterns of life, where we're collecting information all the time, and we know what their generation cycle starts and ends with that missile launch. So then we can recognize, and maybe at the earliest stages when there's very little risk or threat, we can engage. We can do other things. We can engage diplomatically, or we can posture our forces. This is the information age, and it's just heating up. It's not even truly there. How many people have tried Chat GPT? All right. How many people are doing their homework assignments with Chat GPT? Yeah, no, it's all right. I know, that's right. This is that's just a joke. Okay, so the thing is that there's a lot of new capabilities and tools, and it's really important for you to be mindful of what's coming out and look at how to exploit them for the good and how they can be exploited for the bad against you, right? So there's a lot of influence operations that are going on against us today, and the root cause is our ability to do that, gain situational awareness and act decisively at a time of our choosing to counter some of the things that are happening across all instruments of national power. Just a few insets here. Here you go. On your side, the top left is an amazing piece of software developed at Google that allows us to basically orchestrate a large network of things. It could be satellites, airplanes, everything else in a multi-domain environment. And it has 1 million operating hours on it. And Google spent $7 billion developing it. I'm sorry, they spent $1 billion over 7 years developing it, right? And it's commercial off the shelf. And you go, hey, we're trying to build JADC2 and do other things and do high-level orchestration. Why are we trying to recompete? Why are we trying to reinvent that? Let's just go and figure out how we can leverage that. Next thing down is actually it's a 3D printer. I don't think, is there a laser in here? No, there isn't. It's a 3D printer that's printing a rocket. So that's a company called Relativity Space in Los Angeles, and they've already flown one flight. They're getting ready for another, but they can 3D print the entire rocket, and which is really amazing. The third company down is a company in Livermore, California, that's called Vector Atomic, and they are mass producing a quantum inertial sensor that has almost no drift when compared to inertial measuring units that we use for navigation, for other purposes. And if you're in a GPS-denied environment, the technology I flew with for most of my career, we use ring laser gyros, and the photons in the light that they're using are very noisy, and so there's a lot of drift. This uses a cold-down technology, and it's uber cool, and we're going to fly it for the first time here this next year, and it'll change everything, because you don't have to worry about getting updates for your GPS as often as we do now. And then the rocket on the right, I think that's, I'm pretty sure that's Rocket Lab, which is actually a company out of New Zealand that's actually set up some operations in the United States. But next to SpaceX, which everybody's familiar with, Rocket Lab is the #1 small launch company in the world, and we use it too. But this is technology that developed with our allies, right? Our partners. And if we weren't open to partnering and using capabilities developed by our allies and partners, we'd be at a real loss. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about where we're at. And many of you may not know, the defense budget is one of the largest pieces of the U.S. national budget year after year. And a large part of that is money that goes to, pay, to entitlements, to healthcare, a lot of things like that. But I tell you, like in FY24 next year, if we get a budget and we don't get continuing resolutions, there will be a $140 billion budget for research, development, test, and evaluation. In other words, $140 billion of that 800-something billion dollar budget is going to go towards new technologies, new ideas. 1% of that budget is used for small business innovative research, 1.4 billion-ish, across the entire department. If we're really lucky, my organization will get 1%, or about $1 billion to go out and to bring commercial technology like this into the department, right? This is stuff we don't have to develop. It's already developed in the commercial industry. And DARPA will probably get about 3% of that budget to invent new things. Right? So I just talked about 5% of the budget of the innovation budget. What's the other 95% go to? Well, all kinds of things. A lot of future things, right? And there's a natural tension that you're going to discover as you go out in the field. If you're assigned with your forces forward in the operating area, you're part of a joint task force, or you're part of your RPAC or Army, Europe and Africa. You're a forward component of the CIFLIC. You're vested in fighting the fight tonight. I need a capability right now. My buddy Pete Newell, we need a capability right now so we can survive in this fight and win. The budgets are largely built around the future. And the future is really important. You can't ever stop modernizing, but most of the budgets are going towards future weapon systems. And those are things that are programmed and budgeted over many years, and most likely you're not going to see them fielded until like the 2030, 2035. It's not really good because they use 5-year increments to tell you when those things are coming on the line, right? So a lion's share of the budget is going towards the future fight. Or you say the next war. Well, what about the current war? How do we deter, how do we defend, and how do we dominate and win if we had to go to fight the fight tonight? And so part of this understanding how we got here, which on the left is, this gives you a good insight on the 1960s, right? So, I guess, are we boomers? I don't even know what we are. We're boomers, right? Because all right, okay. So I was born in 1963, and we went to the moon, yeah, all kind of stuff. But the United States was a juggernaut in research and development post World War II and in the 50s and 60s. So you're looking here that basically the U.S. defense was 36% of the global R&D expenditure, and other U.S. government was 33%. So 2/3 of all the expenditures on research and development were in the United States alone. It was just pretty incredible. And so what happened? Back then, you get space. They invented GPS, microelectronics, first satellites. They just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Corona. These pretty extraordinary time period, but most of that research and development came out of the government, not out of industry. And very few companies had the capacity or the resources to do research and development. So if you look in the history books, you hear about Bell Laboratories or Xerox, Park, and some of the big companies that invented things. Zip forward 50 years, and look how the world has changed, right? So the Defense Department from 2016 forward only really contributes about 4% of the global R&D funding. The rest of it is all commercially based. And then the United States and China spend an equal amount of money on R&D, and then the last 49% is the rest of the world. So two things to understand about this. China is fast following the United States in research and development, and they're spending money, and they're not just stealing everything. That's not the complete story. They've got, they have 14 universities doing applied hypersonics. How many universities do we have in the United States that do applied hypersonics? Do you do applied hypersonics here, right? And this is very key. If you overclassify everything, you're going to wind up with a very small number of people who will eventually run out of ideas, right? So that's not good. But the other side of this is that the commercial sector spends today almost 4 times more on research and development than the United States government does. And our allies, if we team with our allies and partners, we can regain technological advantage and the ability to sustain that over the long term vis-a-vis China. Before I go forward, I'm using 2 terms in this brief that I want to clarify right now: invention and innovation. So DARPA invents, right? They look at, hey, what's the new technology thing? Let's go out and invent it, and that's what they do. So at DARPA, if there's somebody from DARPA on the stage today, they say, hey, do you have a if you have a smartphone in your pocket, like I do, there's 11 or I think a dozen or more technologies that DARPA invented that's in this smartphone. DARPA did not invent the smartphone, right? The innovation is the application of taking ideas, bringing different disparate technologies, and creating a product, something that you can produce at scale, right? Or solving a problem in a different way. And so if you're doing innovation, you're not necessarily doing an invention, but you're applying your knowledge, your team's knowledge, you're applying different technologies to get after a problem. And the cool thing is that the environment is rich today because one thing we've done successfully is we've created an opportunity for you to be able to reach outside of the US Army and pull technology in through organizations like Army Futures Command, right? The 75th, there's other, the Army Research Lab, and some of the other organizations that are doing important work. they do some innovation too, but they're really doing breakthrough research and trying to get after new ways of solving tough problems. But there's a whole host of commercial companies that are doing things that have relevancy to the way that you're going to warfight in the future. So this is about leverage. Leverage their investment, and don't try to change a company and their vector to what they're trying to do in the marketplace. That's like the worst. That's like the wicked problem for them. Try to find ways to exploit what they're working on to solve problems in the Army. They will not know the problem, but you could bring them in to help curate the problem, right? So they understand it's not the BO thing. it's some other problem, but you'll do a better job of isolating that problem, identifying it, and solving it quickly in an agile way, which is something important. A couple of things I learned in the special operations community. One, if you don't own it, you don't control it, right? So that means that if you're somebody supporting you with everything that's critical to your operation, there's going to come a day when they can't support you because they have a higher priority, something or whatever. So that's one good reason to innovate. But another good reason to innovate is because you want to build that muscle mass. So when you're trying to solve problems in combat or during a large-scale humanitarian disaster, there's all kinds of missions that the Army goes out and does every day. You want a team that's operating at they're ready for the marathon. They're ready for that innovation marathon. Yeah. Oop, I think it was too far forward. There you go. Okay. This graph may wig you out just a little bit, but let me just explain it. So what I want to show here is that the x-axis is time, and then the y-axis is the rate of change of technology. So I described this fourth industrial revolution as a period of accelerated technological change. In other words, it's not linear, right? So that's why it's a curve. If you start today, and I'll use my smartphone example again, right? So you're either Apple or Android, or maybe you're some other, but the average American replaces their smartphone every 11 months. So what's yeah, I know. So what's the product life cycle for a company in that market? Is they're gonna introduce new products about once a year, right? So when companies produce something at mass and scale, they focus on the available technology today, and so what they do is that curve represents the current state of the art. What's the current state of technology? And by the time they put this out on the marketplace, they're just a little notch below whatever the current state of technology is, right? And then the way they keep their technological relevance is they have another product that's coming out behind that, and so they're just kind of stair-stepping or ratcheting up, and so those companies like that, they're fast following. A very important term. They're going to fast follow the current state of the art of technology. There's companies like SpaceX, right? They invented reusable rockets, and they're producing rockets at scale. And because they're doing that, they're first movers, right? So they've taken an extraordinary risk. They've developed something. They're test flying it, and when they introduce it, if they're successful, that risk with great risk comes great reward. So they define. First movers are actually defining the current state of technology, right? So DARPA, in the military context, is the first mover. We don't want them trying to make a better toenail clipper. That's not first moving. We want them to introduce technology that's going to give us a strategic advantage. So that's one of the things they're focused on. So we have this large innovation ecosystem that's tackling problems in different ways. But the department, if you read the National Defense Strategy, the position of the United States Armed Forces is to be a fast follower of commercial industry. And so we want to be tightly coupled with whatever the current state of the art is. Most of you haven't had an emotional experience with an acquisition program yet, but let me just tell you, here's how programs of record work, right? So in order for us to buy something today, let's say it's a new tank, let's say it's a new aircraft. In order for us to buy a new weapon system today, we had to back up 3 years, right? We had to start asking for the money for that new weapon system 3 years ago. In order to ask for the money, we had to have well-defined requirements for that weapon system. And right now, the batting average is that it normally takes, it could take 5, 8, sometimes 10 years to define the requirements. The requirements are very detailed, right? And they're all validated. They're validated requirements. So right away, we're already back a decade. But before they started defining the requirements, they have a need. They're only going to build whatever the new weapon system is with proven technology. So they want heritage or reliability with the parts they're going to use to make that weapon system. So, and sometimes they'll freeze the technology 10 years before that. So in the traditional way that we've been buying systems for the past 5 decades, since the 1960s, we basically, if we're buying it today, we're buying 20-year-old technology, right? And I'll give you a good example. And some of the satellites that we fly today, they have what's called the RAD 750 microprocessor chip in there. And the RAD 750 is a radiation-hardened chip that was produced 20 years ago. And really, in the late 90s, if you bought, most of you probably weren't even born yet, an Apple computer would have a PowerPC chip in it. And that's the current state of technology that we're using in some of the things that we really care about today. So we did that for heritage. We did that on requirements. But guess what? 20 years ago, how worried were we about cyber threats, right? So we've mitigated and totally brought down all the risk on radiation in space, and we created this new vulnerability, which is cyber threat, right? Because the 14-year-olds in most of the peer competitor countries know how to hack into old stuff, right? So that's really problematic. But there's more to the story. So then it usually takes a couple years to actually get the acquisition done, and then we go into production. And what we do is we open a production line, we produce that weapon system, and then we pretty much close that production line, right? And then once it's fielded, then we go about trying to fix all the things that are wrong with it, right? So we do block mods, we do things. These programs get insanely expensive, and then usually what happens is we retire them before most of them get up to just where we are to the current state of technology at the time that we started buying it, right? So what happens is if we don't take any risk at all on the acquisition side when we're designing and developing these systems, what happens is we defer all that risk to the warfighter. And it's not a conscious thing. It's just an accepted thing. It's like, look, we want reliability. This is how they design and build it. But when they build it, because they're fielding these things in the fourth industrial revolution, a period of accelerated change of technology, they're not ready for the fight. So how do we mitigate that? How do we close that technology gap that's shown up there in the right-hand side, in that arrow with this blue? Well, the way we do is we embrace agility and we look at ways to fast follow industry. So you can have a wickedly cool tank that's going to survive everything, great materials, but let's have a software-defined computer and system on there and the ability to communicate with modern satellites so you can have that information advantage and really dominate in lots of different ways with that weapon system. And those things can be agile. The whole thing doesn't have to be agile. But this is just, this is really our analysis of where we're at and where we need to go, and we're just turning a page on this. A lot of this is going to be up to you and your generation to shape this environment. And the cool thing about that is we're not saying that our defense industrial base can't cut it. No, they're really good, but they're constrained by the type of contracts we write, and the type of agreements we get to, or overclassification. And so we have to find new ways so that we can accept some risk, so we're not deferring risk onto the warfighter, right? It's very important. And there's a lot of culture here, right? So if you've been doing these programs for your entire career, you're wedded to the way that we did it in the 60s, but the assumptions are all wrong. And then today, we have to do more, and that's one of the things we do at DIU. So I'm going to close and talk about impact. So. There it goes. Okay, everything you see on the slide here is a result of commercial technology that we basically provided and infused for the benefit of Ukrainian forces, right? So when I started working at the Defense Innovation Unit, the first thing that the department asked us to do is to go out and find commercial sources for synthetic aperture radar satellite imagery, and which means that with synthetic aperture radar, you can see in day, night, and you can see through the weather. At that time, there were zero. There wasn't one commercial company that did synthetic aperture radar, and in the United States. You could buy products from Italy, Germany, Canada, and Japan. But they were really geared more towards doing imagery, and if you call them, you get a beautiful picture on Kodak film, Kodak print paper in the mail, and it was a few $1,000s. So within 5 years, we have now no fewer than 3 active companies that are doing it, and it's soon to be 4 or 5 that are doing synthetic aperture radar commercially. And the best thing about commercial is it's unclassified. So the information we can share with our allies and partners. And the information is optimized not for Kodak paper, for film, it's optimized for cloud computing, right? So it's not good enough to have a technology, but technology for what, right? So we want to be able to take pictures from space and without a human setting eyes on it, learn from it with computer vision from other algorithmics, and then put information back into battle space. So that's one good example. A different example, and I'm glad I put this slide in here because I didn't add him as a mentor, but a good friend of mine, John Serafini, also from this institution, Army officer, Army aviation officer. He is the CEO of a company called Hawkeye 360, and what they do is they just collect RF information and turn it into actionable information. Well, what you're seeing here in this frame is GNS interference. In other words, there's most likely the Russians or others are basically jamming the GPS, and we can measure that and provide that information back to not just to the warfighter because it's unclassified, to ships that are traveling in the Mediterranean or in other regions to make sure that they're not vulnerable. On the bottom right is a algorithm that was developed in partnership with Microsoft that basically looks at large-scale damage after like a hurricane or anything like that, a wide area disaster. And then what it does is it classifies various levels of building damage. So we were already working on this for homeland security applications and for emergency management. But as soon as the Ukraine started getting attacked, we're running this algorithm continuously. And guess what? We're collecting real-time data on war violations, right? Destruction of schools, churches, hospitals, all this infrastructure, and all that information is going to The Hague, right? So for war crimes. But we're also able to really determine the extent of damage, and we're where to properly put relief and other things. This is all being done autonomously, and our models are getting better all the time. And then, of course, you've all learned or heard, but here's a Starlink satellite terminal that's employed in Ukraine. And the last time I counted, there was over 5,000 of them there. But like this, the broadband, the ability for the warfighter to have broadband communications that's resilient, that software defined means that they can better protect it against different threats, is really enabling the strategic outcome, the strategic effect. The Russians were never able to silence Zelensky, ever. And that meant that the Ukraine people could get their message out on the street. And because we use commercial capabilities, we were able to share through the media and other institutions all the Russian buildup, the type of bombing that's happening. So we're basically doing information operations, counter information operations and influence by just revealing the truth. And the neat thing is that on this picture on the right is basically a picture from folks in Taiwan, right, on advocating and standing their alliance with Ukraine. And so I'm going to end on this because when you're innovating and trying to solve individual problems, you always have to be looking for the opportunity to have a strategic effect. The special operations lives on that. Solve a tactical problem and get a strategic outcome. And you'll do that through innovation, through teamwork, through mentorship, and partnerships with all the forces that you're going to encounter and work with over the course of your career. So with that, thank you very much, and I think we're going to take some Q&A. So,
If you have any questions, please come down to the microphone.
All right.
Good afternoon, sir. Cadet Andrew Wynn, Company Delta 4. Sir, you mentioned that, you yourself went through a significant time where you really started buying into the environment that's around you. We talk at West Point a lot about inspiring the future generation, whether that be in research or militarily. What do you think is the challenge of inspiring people as mentors, and what do you think is the best way to get around doing that, sir?
I think it's, in most cases, it's really culture. So, Congress defined what a joint force is back in the 80s, and I'm sure you know the history behind that, but we had some pretty catastrophic failures that led to the creation of the joint force and how we operate as one unified force. I'm very proud of my service. You're very proud of your service, and it's really important. And it's great. You have to have that identity, and you need that so that you can really excel in the land component and the other missions that the Army does. But you can't just do that exclusively. As you gain, your priority for the next few years is be the absolute expert in what you do in the U.S. Army. But as you start transitioning into field grades or senior company grade, junior field grades, that's when you should be going, how do I work with the joint force? How do I combine what I'm doing with an effect that can be achieved through space or through the air or with maritime? What are different ways that I can solve a lot of the logistics and sustainment issues for how the Army is going to operate in the future? So I think it's, we will never be caught cold. We won't have a Maginot Line type of moment if we're always challenging ourselves to identify gaps and new capabilities because we build this innovation mindset. So hopefully that helps answer that question, but that's what I would say.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll go in the back there.
Sir, Cadet Hughes, Company B4. My question revolves question surrounding innovation versus integration. As we move towards more multi-domain operations that require more systems to be integrated, how do you introduce more more innovation with those systems without requiring an overhaul of everything?
Yeah, that is like the question of the day. So let me give you a good example, right? So, wow. Yeah. There we go. All right, here, this is very important, right? So we have convergence, we have overmatch, we have the air battle management system, ABMS. There's other systems. There's Skynet. And what happens is that in order for the Army to be completely integrated in that land component scheme of battle, right, it has to be integrated. And the way you integrate on the land is a lot different than the way that you integrate like maritime underwater vehicles, aircraft and things that the Navy has. So innovation is not about leveling the field and forcing everybody to take some risk on for the greater good. No. How many people get their cell phone service through Verizon, right? How many get through AT&T, right? How many through name another one, right? Okay, right. That's right. Have you ever wondered, right? It should just think about this for a moment. It should amaze you that you can call anyone on planet Earth, or certainly here in CONUS, you can call anyone and you can pass pictures, text, you can maybe stream video, and you don't even care what kind of terminal, right? What kind of phone that they have as a terminal. You don't care, you don't need to know. Why? Because the industry established standards, and what industry has done is industry realized there's greater path to revenue, more revenue to be had by having an integrated network architecture and making it so that you have the choice of not only what phone you want, but who your service provider is, what apps you put down, but you can use it. And all we have to do is have that aha moment in the Joint Force and say, here's how we benefit from an integrated joint architecture. So we have JADC2. Hopefully this is just for this audience here, but the joke in my generation is if it begins with the letter J, you'll never see it, right? And it's largely because the components, the individual components get that lion's share of budget to go after their future programs, right? There's not that much money for joint. So we have to work together to achieve the jointness, but I think we don't do jointness by leveling the field. What we do is we create joint interoperability by adopting best practices from industry. And sometimes we need industry to come in and help us to achieve that. So that's a great question, though. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we'll go down here.
Sir, Cadet Orion Rolliter from Company H1. In the last 10 years or so, the Navy spent around $100 billion or more on the development of the Zimwatt destroyer before deciding to discontinue the project recently.
Yeah.
How do you keep research and development on the cutting edge while also keeping it economical? How do we avoid similar mistakes in Army programs like the A-22 Valor or the A-10 medium armored vehicle?
Well, I'll tell you, this is let me throw some coal on that fire, right? So in the Air Force, and I know people who've worked on it, the Air Force is Air Force researcher people, very excited about, they spent billions of dollars over a decade and developed an airborne laser program, which has never been fielded, right? And so what happens is you can't just give buckets of cash to the research community and say, go invent new capabilities for us. In industry, you know what industry does? They want to, most of the companies that we bring in, they want to talk to end users. They want, what's the problem that is relevant to you? If you get end users at the tactical level, I'm feeling a little bit of age today because I rode a horse for 20 miles last weekend in the Sierras, which was a lot of fun. But I'm just saying, my generation, we're not the warfighters. You saw the pictures, that's a slice of time. The tactical situation is different today than it was when I was a tactical operator. So leadership has to be appreciative of that. You don't want leadership saying, well, this is what the new weapon system needs to be. You want the warfighter doing it. Grassroots is where the best innovation will come, and creating the opportunity for you to participate in that, and then also be a driver for that. What technologies we're latching into to fast follow is the way that we prevent those type of things in the future. And then we're spending money in a smart way. We're not going to get it always right, but we can mitigate situations like that. And there's a whole other organization that is just like us called the Strategic Capabilities Office, SCO. And what SCO does is they look at those type of weapon systems and they reimagine how they could be used in a modern context. So like the Butow, which I think is the system you're talking about, they turned it into like a special operations platform, which is cool, but that wasn't the original idea, right? But that's also a great question. So you should never feel bad about diming out people in the system for why they're doing something and it doesn't pan out. It's accountability.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Sir, Cadet Alexander Heckman, Houston, Texas, Company F1. So, sir, with each industrial revolution that we had, there solved many societal problems, and it's very grateful for that. But there's also a fear out there that it created many unintentional consequences. So, sir, what do you say would be the unintentional consequences for the next industrial revolution, and how do you expect to relieve those fears, sir?
Right. Well, thank you. Well, this is definitely an area where ignorance is not bliss, right? So this week, Elon Musk and other executives who've been working on artificial intelligence for some time went to meet with Congress and the White House. I think that as you evolve any new capability, you always have to look at the exploitation of it, for exploitation for the good and how the adversary is going to exploit it. And the sooner you do that, the better. I mean, we went hog wild and look at the internet today. It needs to be abandoned, right? Because when they designed the internet, the original internet that the Army and other folks within the DoD helped to create, they never thought that anybody other than like research scientists and responsible people would use it. And of course, now it's just like, it's an information gutter, right? So basically, so what you have to do is you have to, if you say I'm going to develop a new capability, how do I prevent it from exploitation? That's what we're doing with the way that we're throwing new technology forward to solve the JADC2 problem. That we're not just creating new problems, we're actually solving problems, and we have better resiliency and protection against threats. So.
All right, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Sir, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. On behalf of West Point and the Modern War Institute, I'd like to present you with this book, Connected Soldiers Life Leadership Lessons by Mr. John Spencer, and the coveted MWI coin.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. Great. I expect you all to autograph it on your way out. No. All right, thank you.